It's so lonely at the top. I've been attending private schools my whole life, and because of my parents, I've always been surrounded by rich kids. And I was one of them, and let me tell you, throughout different ages, I was expressing the wealth of my parents in very different ways. Until I was in middle school, it didn't really matter to me. Like, I was wearing whatever I wanted. I didn't even realize how privileged we are because I thought that everybody is living like this. I lived in this bubble. But as I was growing up, I realized that my family is actually very privileged, and I started feeling prideful because of that. And I know that it's horrible. I know, don't cancel me, but I'm just trying to be honest because I feel like so many people are scared to talk about privilege, and they're always either downplaying it and they're not telling it how it is. So I want to actually tell you how it feels like to be a rich kid. So when I was in high school, it was so important for me, guys, to be on the same level with my friends. And I'm originally from Ukraine, so you don't understand. It's not like in America. Girls in Ukraine, since the age they're 14, they're wearing heels, they're going to salons like every day. Guys, I literally had a membership at a hair salon where I would go and get my hair washed. Like, I would go there every second day. So you would pay there for like a gym membership. And then after school, I would go and do my hair. It was crazy stuff. Like, it was crazy superficial, but now that I'm thinking about this, I'm like, this is actually crazy. But when I was 14, 15, I'm like, well, all of my girlfriends are doing it, so I guess it's fine. I just thought that this is how life is. And this is very interesting because my mom was never like this. I know that a lot of my girlfriends, they had moms who were like acting very bougie, and my mom was always the opposite. My mom is extremely humble. For example, my dad was always the person who was convincing her to buy clothes, and she was always like, I don't need it, I already have a lot. And I was like, I do. But because my parents knew that it's very important for me to fit in when I was 14/17, they wouldn't stop me from those things. From time to time, they would tell me, Albina, I don't think you're doing this because you actually like it. I think we're doing this because all of your friends are doing this. And I was like, no, this is actually who I am. And my parents were like, all right, if that's what you think you are, then fine. So I really appreciate my parents giving me some type of advice, but not pushing it on me, because I had freedom to actually act how I wanted to. The only thing my parents wouldn't allow me to do, unlike many of my other friends were doing, is they didn't allow me to like go out late. So every time at like 8 p.m. my driver would pick me up and I would have to go home, and I would only be allowed to go to the clubs when it was somebody's birthday or it was some like big event. Then I would be allowed to, but I would still go with bodyguards. And even that, when I was a kid, it was embarrassing for me to have bodyguards, because we would go to the cinema and I would literally ask my bodyguards to pretend that they don't know me, but a lot of my friends knew their faces at that point. So I would like go to the movie theater first, and they would get in when it's dark, and they would sit like some rows behind me, but when I would get up and go to the bathroom, they would stand up and follow me, and everybody knew. So I felt embarrassed. But when I was in high school, it actually made me feel so cool, because so many of my friends who were also extremely privileged, they were impressed by that. And I was like, yeah, I'm the coolest one. It's just me and a couple of other guys who have bodyguards, so we're like clearly the coolest. And then when it was time to go to university, all of my friends, they would apply to mostly like New York, London, like all of the cool cities. And I somehow ended up going to Syracuse. Just so you understand, this is in the middle of nowhere. Like, there is nothing there. And just so you also understand my type of situation back then, my family was financially struggling a lot because the war in Ukraine has started. So a lot of things in my life were changing so rapidly. Now, on top of us struggling financially in my family, now also all of my friends are going to those cool cities, and I'm going to Syracuse. Like, it was an amazing school, but it was in the middle of nowhere. And then I came there, and I was living in this dorm because it was a requirement for me to live in the dorm for 2 years. And a lot of my friends in London and in New York, they also had to live in the dorms. But every weekend they had cool places to go to. And a lot of them were actually in the same cities, so their friend group would stay the same. And I felt like completely alone. This experience was the best thing which have ever happened to me, because often what seems like a curse is actually redirecting you to something better, and this was exactly the case for me. So prior to me moving to university, and this is another ridiculous thing, I thought I'm never gonna work in my life. And the reason why I thought that is because my parents, they were always encouraging me to be independent. They would always encourage me to do well at school, to do all of those activities such as gymnastics, music. So they really like wanted me to be somebody in life. But at the same time, they were like, if you don't want to work, you shouldn't work. And then I witnessed them struggling financially, and they were sending me still a lot of money. Like, it was 2015, and they were sending me $3,500 every month, and that was like them cutting my budget rapidly, just so you understand. And I didn't have to pay for dorm, I didn't have to pay for food, like all of this was already a part of the tuition. So I had 3.5K just for my own spendings. And there is nothing to spend money on in Syracuse, okay? And somehow I still managed to spend all of this. And just so you understand, when I would also have a trip to New York, my parents would send me additional money. But because internally I knew that, okay, now I have 3.5K instead of 10, like they would probably send me, I felt like depressed, because everything in life is about your perception, right? For example, I think if my parents were still doing financially well and they would still send me 3.5K, I would feel cool. But because I knew that like they're struggling, I was like, yeah, this is so little. And I started working, I was making like ridiculous money, right? Like I was barely making anything. But I realized that I actually enjoy working, and I enjoy building relationships. I was working as a teaching assistant every semester. I actually met a lot of people because of that. And then I started working in IT department because I was majoring in computer science. And because of the job, guys, I was able to get a job where I'm working now for the past 5 years, only because I had this experience on my resume from my university. I was able to get the job which is paying me so much money right now. But as I was doing all of this and as I was trying to find ways to enjoy it, I was still so jealous of my friends because I had crazy FOMO. Every time I would open Instagram, all of them were doing like such cool things. And moreover, my friends, even though they were from Ukraine, they were not going through the same financial struggles because they were from the central Ukraine and I was from the east. And the war has started on the east of Ukraine, so it affected all of my parents' business, but my friends were okay. So they were still going on all of those cool vacations. They would fly home so often. And I didn't, because I realized that like I can't spend this money. And even though my parents, they're willing not to spend anything on themselves, but they were doing their best in order to make sure that I don't notice any changes in my life. So they were still offering me to go to all of those vacations, to fly home as often as I can, but I just knew that this is not right. That's why I wasn't accepting this. But because of that, I got a lot of work experience. And then, once I graduated from university, I was able to get this job. And then I started looking at what my friends are doing. And once again, just so you understand, many of them, just like me when I was 17, they were not planning to work. But life is a crazy thing, guys. What you have to know about life is that nothing is certain. You can have billions, guys. And I have a lot of friends who were actually, like their parents were billionaires. And then they would either go to jail, or like they would just go broke, or somebody would get dead, like post-USSR countries, right? Nothing is certain. And then they would go completely broke, and then they would have to start working. And it's easier to have this transition, and I'm so glad, and it sounds ridiculous, I'm so glad that my parents were going through financial struggles when I was in university, because that was the time when it was easier for me to have this transition from like being a rich kid, then, and of course I acknowledge my privilege. Even in university I was extremely privileged, but in my eyes it was like going from a rich kid to like those humble beginnings. So ridiculous, I understand. But I actually felt like I'm making a huge transition, and it's easier to make this transition when you're already going through a huge change, and my change was moving from my home country and going to university, so it would be difficult either way. But on top of the difficulty of going to university and going far away from home and from my parents, I also was experiencing this financial struggle, and it also made me work. So all of those transitions were happening at the same time. But for a lot of my friends, it happened after university, and especially war has started in Ukraine, like full invasion war has started in 2022, and a lot of my friends, of course, like they faced financial difficulties which they've never faced before, and all of a sudden they realized that now they have to work, they have to do something. But in university they didn't do any internships because they thought that they would never have to do this. They had some like fake jobs, right? They would either work for their parents but not really work for them, and now their parents also can't provide them with those fake jobs, so they actually have to go to the real world and find those jobs. And it's hard to find a job when there is nothing on your resume. It only says that you worked at Baba's company and you were assistant of a CEO. Everybody knows that it's fake. But I'm not here to tell you that, oh yeah, I'm so cool, I was the only one working. What? Wow, you're so cool. You were just like 99% of the people. Everybody was working just like you. But the reason why I'm telling you this, once again, I'm trying to explain how it works in this crazy privileged world. And this brings me to my next point. So many of my rich friends pretend that they're poor. You know, when you go on Instagram and you scroll your feed, you see that like everybody's going on vacations, everybody's getting those expensive bags. Real rich kids, guys, they always downplay that. First of all, because Baba is probably in a corruption system and they don't want others to know this. And second of all, because they just like pretending that they're like those hipster cool people, they're above all of this money, and it's so easy to pretend that you're above the materialistic stuff when you can easily meet your needs with help of money. But they're pretending that they do not care about money and they just care about art and smoking cigarettes and talking about something on those trashy rooftops. Well, in reality, all of this is so hypocritical, because then they attend NYU and then they live in those apartments for $10,000, but they're humble. They're so humble. And on social media, they just post like random stuff. You would never guess that they're rich. And one of the main reasons why they're doing this is because later in life, when they themselves either open a business or start working on something, they want to pretend, guys, that they're self-made. And this is what you have to understand about most of the rich kids. They will pretend that they're self-made. And that's why when you go on social media and you see that like, oh, this 21 years old just started this company and they got investments of $15 million. The investors are Baba and Baba's best friends, okay? Those are the investors. So when you see this, please understand that a lot of those people, they're just not telling what is their actual background. And this is why for their entire life that they're cosplaying that they're from humble beginnings. So many of them simply do not acknowledge their privilege, and it's absolutely insane. But they're also doing this because so many of my friends are so deeply insecure because they feel like for their entire life they will never outperform their parents. And the truth is, 90% of them will not. Because my dad always told me, never compare your journey with my journey. First of all, I grew up in a different time. My dad was able to make a lot of money because he also was there during the historical time of the fall of the USSR. And just so you understand, guys, historical times are happening all the time. It's just you have to catch an opportunity. But I'm not as smart as my dad, and I can easily admit this. I know that my dad is a financial genius, and I'm not even close to being like him. And my dad, he actually had the motivation to make money, right? Like, I would like to think that I'm also very motivated, but I never had a need to work in order to survive, in order to put food for the entire family. And my dad did. And my dad started working when he was 14 because he was in poverty. I never had this crazy need to go out there and get something from the world. I was never that hungry because I was always, even at the worst times, I was always surrounded by so much comfort. And in the back of my mind, even at the worst times, I always think that like, I'll be fine. And I think, guys, this is the biggest privilege of having money. Is that you have a peace of mind. Because The biggest luxury is not being able to afford flying on a private jet or buying anything whenever you want to. Of course, all of this is amazing, but it's your mental health. And it's this confidence that you will actually be fine. Until I started working, I didn't understand that people have savings. I didn't understand that so many people live paycheck to paycheck. I didn't realize that people have budget for groceries. I didn't understand that people just don't go outside and they start shopping. They have budgets. And I often didn't even know how much I would spend in a month, because my parents would just send me money and I would swipe, and at some point it would get declined, and then I would call Baba and I would be like, can you please send me more? And that's it. And do you understand how much confidence in your family and in your privilege you have in order to not think about it twice? This is the craziest part, and this is the best part about the privilege, is that you have a peace of mind. And so many people say that, like, oh, money cannot buy happiness. This is a lie which they're telling to people who do not have money so they feel better about their lives. And I'm not trying to sound like a horrible person. I'm just trying to be honest, because trust me, I've never been more miserable than when my parents were struggling financially, because it caused so much uncertainty. At some point, I didn't even know if I would be able to go to university. And this was the anxiety about finances, which I've never experienced before. And I'm sure you cannot be happy while having this constant anxiety about if you have enough money. Yes, money does not buy happiness. Like, money directly does not buy happiness. But money can get you so many things which can make you happy. For example, great education for kids. If your love language is gifts, you can always treat your loved ones. And my dad always says that money makes you happy if you have somebody to share this resource with, right? So my dad was able to share it with his direct family, which is me, my two sisters, and my mom. Then he would share it with his brothers, sisters, and so on, then with his cousins, then with his friends, then with his community. And that's how, by the way, generational gap is declining, because if you're a good person who becomes successful, you're not only thinking about yourself, but you're also helping people around you. And then you start noticing how first it's your family who's changing, then it's your community, then it's your city, because now people have more money and they're investing in businesses, they're creating jobs, and so on and so forth. By the way, guys, do you like my heels? Anyways, I just wanted to give you a glimpse into how some of the quote-unquote rich kids are thinking. But if you have any other questions, please let me know. The reason why I want to talk about this is because I think the way rich kids are represented in TV shows, in movies, it's so twisted. And in reality, it's very different. There is so much common between different social classes. And people don't understand this. I want to be the person who creates this type of bridge where we can knowledge share, we can help each other, and somehow aim towards closing the wealth gap. Because right now, what I'm witnessing is that rich is getting richer and poor people are getting more poor. And I think one of the easiest steps to make towards changing this is knowledge sharing. Because I want to share the advices which my parents, who were able to build something, were sharing with me as I was growing up. Because I believe that we can succeed only if all of us are succeeding. If you want to hear more of a mindset of rich kids, please subscribe. And as always, I'm rooting for you.